Good evening, Twitch. The time has finally arrived. It is 9 p.m. It is Friday evening. It's time for the Baldo Invitational Tournament Grand Final of 2020. You've been waiting months for this. I've been waiting months for this since I was tragically knocked out of the tournament in round 1. Certainly not the upset of the century. Probably quite deserved. There's a reason that particular match was not streamed. For starters, it only lasted about 8 minutes. But it has allowed me to enjoy the rest of the tournament from the viewing pedestal, the watchtower that is Twitch streaming. So, we are waiting for both players to join the lobby. In fact, I think I may pop into the lobby myself just so that I can wish the finalists good luck before they begin the game. Why not? Who is to stop me? Well, technically the lobby host could certainly stop me, but I don't think he would be that cruel. So let me just switch over to our game view here now, and we'll take a look at the lobby, and we'll see who's got it set up and who's ready to go. I can introduce our competitors for the evening. Those of you who have been following the semi-finals will already know who they are, of course. And here we are in lobby with Zach Frenish, the first of their 2 finalists. Zach Frenish having arrived into the final after a thrilling 5-game series semi-final against groundskeeper Willie, winning 3 matches in a row and leaving his opponent unfortunately bereft of a scoreline. Let's have a brief interview with Mr. Zach Frenish and see how he's feeling before entering into this thrilling 7-game final series. Dear Zach, how do you feel ahead this? Meanwhile, as Zach is composing himself ahead of this game and composing a reply to our excellent investigative journalistic question, we can take a look at the custom map pool that he has hopefully already set up in advance of Grimm's arrival to the game. So Zach has said he's really looking forward to testing his skills against his friend Grimm. Obviously, they've faced off against one another many times in the past, it's certainly true. And it's been some tight games between them in the past, so we can hope that this 7-game series will be equally thrilling in nature. So naturally, going into this 7-game series, both players have banned some maps and both players have banned some civs, I think. I could be wrong about the civs. I know that they get 2 mulligans to use over the course of the 7-match series. So that's only 2 for the whole 7 series, which means 2 potential restarts. A little bit disruptive for our viewing pleasure, but critical in terms of the the games, you would, when you're doing a full random selection of maps and civs, you would have to say there are some matchups that would be genuinely unfavorable, particularly at this echelon of competitive play. So Zach Frenette saying no civ bans, 2 mulligans, as we mentioned. In terms of map bans, we can presume that Zach Frenette has already removed them from the custom map pool, so he's going to advise us what those are in a moment, and we will soon see what they are. I know that widely differing views from both finalists in terms of which maps they favor. I believe one of Zach Frenette's map bans was Sokotoa, or Sokoto, or however you say that. Certainly one of the most heinous maps ever to grace the Socotra, that's it there. Certainly one of the most heinous maps to ever grace the fields of Age of Empires. I've played it myself, and I deplore it, and I deplore anyone who would pick it, aka Grimm, of whom it is a great favourite. Meanwhile, Zach Frenette controversially banning, I think, Wolf Hill, or perhaps that was also Grimm. Wolf Hill, one of my favourite maps in comparison to Socotra. One of my favourite maps. Certainly the site of one of my own personal greatest victories on the Age Fields. Perhaps I'll stream that one of these days if I can find the recording. Black Forest also banned Arena and Hill Fort, fairly closed maps, clearly not favoured by these players who like to run loose and free with their starts. Adam's wondering, has Grimm done a runner? Is he hiding? Has he gone into hiding? He's probably climbing up a giant wall to his computer, I would say. Big fan of wall climbing is Grimm. Big fan of wall climbing. So as I mentioned, we'll take a quick look at the custom map pool. We know what maps are banned, but we'll just see what's left for us to work with. We can see still quite a lot to enjoy here. Quite a lot to enjoy still. There are still some closed maps left in the mix. Acropolis, fairly closed, not quite as closed as some of the walled-in starts, like Arena or Hillfort, but fairly closed all the same. We've got some Nomad maps still in the mix, of course. We've got some water maps still in the mix. Nile Delta. Now that would be something to see, I think. That would be something to see. Water Nomad, Yucatan. Team Island, Salt Marsh. There's some golden maps in here, guys. Mediterranean, an old fan favorite from 1999. So I'm not sure about the quality of the stream. It should be 720. I have it set to broadcast at 720, so I'm not sure if it's doing so or not. Well, I'm not sure if I can change it while it's live, but I'll try. Now, if this causes lag, though, you'll have to let me know so that I can reduce it back down. Oh, no, unfortunately I can't change the quality while we're live. It's probably for the best, actually, because I think this is also recording, and whatever hard drive it's recording to probably doesn't have enough space to accommodate a 4K recording. So Mr. Zach Frenette has called mind games on his opponent Grimm for his lack of punctuality to the Baldo Invitational Grand Final. But he does claim to be impervious to same. We'll soon see. Now I'm just checking the WhatsApp to see if there's any word on our second finalist. So Grim claims to be reinstalling graphics drivers. Now, if true, that is potentially a time-consuming task. That was 3 minutes ago that he sent that message, allowing us that knowledge. Again, it could certainly be some caliber of psychological warfare being employed. It would be nice to see who the bronze runner-up accolades go to. I thoroughly encourage a runner-up playoff for third place. And naturally, I would have to root for Mr. Adams in that case on the pure basis that, as the person who knocked me out, I could claim a modicum of reflected glory in his achievement of third place. Now we know that Zach Frennett is not as impervious to matters which test his patience as he perhaps is claiming in the interview here. So if this indeed is mind games and psychological warfare by Grimm, then it could be working. Mr. Zach Frennett inadvertently using a taunt there, the first one of the evening. By the way, I should say that yeah, I'll have to adjust the game volume. That's a good point, which I can do. I'll post 114 for sure in the chat here just to test the volume, but I don't encourage spamming in the actual chat because it's extremely... Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, I'll turn it up a little bit. Well, there's a little known feature where you can actually mute an individual player if they do try to spam you. So that tactic has actually been thought of before. It is true. Grim is a known taunt spammer. That has to be said. So Zach Frennett is joining the stream until the match starts. Technically, he's already on the stream as an interviewee, but perhaps he wants to say his piece in chat as well, and perhaps engage in some bad mouthing of his opponent, all in good spirits, of course. Welcome to the stream. Obviously, you will be unceremoniously ejected if and when your opponent decides to show his face. I can assure you that if you fought me, Zach, we'd be a lot more bored. And I think it would probably only kill 5 minutes worth of time. A good forfeit for Grim. Well, let's say he needs to climb the next wall backwards. So the latest word from Grim is that it may well be 8 more minutes before his drivers are finished installing. Repeat, 8 more minutes. Now, I somehow doubt we'd be able to watch Zach playing Mongol Raiders. That's single player, is it not? The oldest replay. We could take a look. It could be anything. That's a real lucky dip. Let's take a look at then. That's a good idea, Ross. Let's see what we've got in the replay bank here. The oldest one from the 5th of April this year. It's experiencing the well-known bug where we are not actually able to see. Oh no, we are able to see. That's actually just a test. Probably the first match I ever played on Definitive Edition, just to test out the graphics and such. So it looks like the first match we actually played was here. It was looks like it was a 3-way match with myself, Ross Frenette, and Mercury Frost. So I suppose let's take a look and see what happened in this one. It's a regicide match. It's Budapest. Repeat, Budapest. So it's going to be absolutely mental. And we'll just take a look while we're waiting for Grim. And we're in. This is very familiar to me. Oh. I know this bug. It's a bug which prevents you from watching replays from a game version older than the one you're currently using. So that's definitely Let's definitely put that plan on the back burner. I actually think that means we're probably going to get that error for the vast majority of entries in the vault, unfortunately. We can try another one just to confirm, since we're waiting and we have nothing better to do. Now, answer me this, anyone on the stream there. What's the significance of these ones with the scroll on the left-hand side there, and the ones that don't have it? What does that mean? I've just selected one at random here to see what happens. This is one of the ones with the scroll. I don't know if that will make a difference. And it does not look like it will. It's a strange error because the first couple of seconds clearly do play. I heard someone pinging on the map there even. We could take a look at this one. I think everyone would regret it. Has there been an update since the 9th, I wonder? Well, we can give it a go. If this one plays, then it will certainly last us more than enough time for Grim to make an appearance. If it's the one I'm remembering. Oh, now this is interesting. It's in fact taken us right into the middle of the game because we actually did have a crash and restore point. So this is in fact the restoration of that game. So what we're seeing here, to catch you guys up, is possibly the most unassailable defense ever put together, being tested in vain by the forces of Zach Frenesh and the forces of Ross Frenesh, briefly, although, despite being allies mere seconds ago, these two former allies have now turned on one another, with Zach Frenesh burning Ross Frenet's mighty fleet to the ground. Yes, unfortunately the Scorpions, even though they're heavy Scorpions, they were a lot less useful than I had hoped. Scorpions are not a good counter to a fully upgraded navy. Unfortunately, Groundskeeper Willie already long since destroyed. The ravaged homeland from which he came, colonized by Zach Frenesh, with its scant remaining wood resources, being hungrily slurped up by myself. This is when I still had plenty of wood in the bank, as you can see up there in the top left. I would go on to completely squander all of that wood on frivolous projects like fleets that sailed to their deaths almost instantly, scorpions that rolled to the coast and basically into the water without killing anyone. What I should have done with all of that wood is built about 10,000 more of these lovely arambai, which, if I'd had a unit of this size and scale for the entire game, uh, it certainly would have been a less frustrating final 4 hours. I think we can all agree. Yes, I think it'd probably be a little bit more entertaining, given that this is not the start of the game as I thought it was. It'll probably be a little bit more entertaining to take a look at Zach Frennett's competitive play rather than the 4-hour dredge fest that this is soon to devolve into. I think the main landings that were to happen on my base have probably already happened. I think Rue had a massive attack in the south that we missed. So, do we know if Zach's game has started yet? Now, actually, I should turn off this fog of war here so that I can see what Ross Frenna was up to during this time. His handsome Byzantine base with a delightful island wall. Zach Frennet shelling it from a distance, but as I understand it, he was never quite able to make a proper landing. Certainly plenty of light cavalry waiting for anything he might send. Ross Frennet, I should say, throughout this game was attempting to lure the enemy kings, this being a regicide game, to this particular island that he had built. He would ally with a player and then request that their kings arrive by ship to this island, which he named the island of Elba. As far as I recall, nobody took him up on it. And it was the cause of more than a few hundreds of thousands of deaths. We can see my own docks and trade here. Throughout the game, I switched my trade between Zach and Ross Frennet in order to keep it going, as I variously allied with one or other of the two. That's true. I did almost go to Elba. I even moved my king to a transport ship to go to Elba, but it was all a ploy in which to build up a force of scorpions in order to deal with Ross Frennet's fleet. Of course, the scorpions in the end were largely ineffective. So an attempted landing in the south here. The Arambai I found were especially effective against buildings, in fact. Very, very good against buildings. Oh, bottom right corner of my screen, I have a little pop-up that says Grim just started playing Age of Empires, which means it's time to quit this tragedy and head straight to multiplayer. So I'm not sure if Zach has opened up the Baldo Invitational final lobby again. I'm just taking a look for it here. Doesn't look like it's up yet. Well, you see, Groundskeeper Willie, the problem with these free for alls is if you go against the weakest player, aka yours truly, then people will naturally have a sense of pity and gang up on you. The strong preying on the weak is unlikely to evoke any kind of sense of sympathy. And as my round one exit from this tournament has demonstrated, I'm surely scarcely more than a noob. A long game would certainly be my preference as well. Mercury, Frost, a nice Imperial slugfest. Trebuchet attacking Trebuchet. I think it's every red blooded man's dream. So I'll just refresh here. I can see why that took a long time to type. I'm certainly not going to try and say it. I'm sure there must be some kind of way you can turn honey into syrup. It's already the right consistency. Just take out all the bee spirits from it. Oh, now that's an idea, Mercury Frost. I actually have some plum wine that I could be drinking. Let me just take a brief stream break while we're waiting for this lobby to come up, and I'll get myself a nice iced glass of that. Be right back. And we're back. And it looks like Grimm's issues have been resolved, and we are ready to watch match 1 of 7. So, without further ado, looks like game 1 is Migration, and it's going to be the Britons versus the Berbers. We'll see if there are any mulligans at this early juncture, but I don't think we're going to see them with the Britons and the Berbers. Ooh, now look at that map. In the grey, Zach Frenesh. In the blue, Grimm as the Berbers and Zach as the Britons. We'll see plenty in this map. It is an excellent way to start the beginning of the last of this sensational tournament from start to finish. So we can see Zach Frennet going straight for his sheep. We might as well switch on the Fog of War and see who gets the best view of their starting island first. Zach Frennet and Grimm scouting fairly evenly. Oh, now there's a fascinating difference. Grimm starting with some cattle, some cattle, some moose, as they say. Cattle obviously having more food in their haunches than sheep, so we'll see if that crucial advantage leads to ultimate victory for Zach Frennet. Now, it has to be said, Zach Frennet does have a couple of cattle available to the south, which his scout is no doubt about to run into now. There they go. Both players neck and neck on 11 population. Textbook openings from each. Score also almost neck and neck. Slight lead for Grimm, possibly scouting related. He's got most of his island scouted now, whereas Zach Frennet has a little bit more to catch up on that front. Zach Frennet has a slight villager lead, but only by a matter of seconds at this early juncture. A controversial second lumber camp on the boil there for Zach Frennet. Controversial second lumber camp. Not sure what I would say to that. I suppose ultimately it will be needed before victory is achieved or lost in the long run. But yes, that's a good point actually, Mercury Frost. Britons probably do want extra lumber to fund their legions of longbowmen, in addition to the fact that it is also something of a water map as well, so there will be a need to fund some navy, although it has to be said that navy is certainly not a strong point for the Britons. Zach Frennet will probably be keen to get to the main island as soon as possible and entrench himself there so that he doesn't have to rely on getting into too much of a naval slugfest. It looks like Zach Frennet will be the first player to have a dock up and running. Meanwhile, Grimm continuing to expand at essentially the same rate. Although he definitely has a few more houses than Zach Frennet. He is building something of a barrier here with the houses and this mill. Oh, that's a house as well. Ah, his mill's down here. Yes, early scouting on the island will be crucial, particularly because it's got a very strange shape. I think if someone were to land here, only to run into another coast here, they might find themselves a little bit confused, to say the least. So, some fishing ship scouting from Zach Frennet here. Meanwhile, Grim is getting his dock up and running. Not too much time lost between the two. So probably a clever enough move from Grim here. We've seen him do it before, where he is taking pains to defend his initial base, even on a map like Migration. And to be fair, from early aggression, it's probably a decent strategy, considering that these starting islands in Migration do have a sizable enough amount of resources. 8 tiles of gold and 6 tiles of stone. So that is certainly worth defending. Repeat, worth defending. Zach Frennet has begun the fishing game. Many snapper will be eaten. And there's the transport ship. The scout ready to embark. And we'll just switch on Fog of War for a moment once he lands, so we can see his fresh-faced discovery of this wondrous new land. Villager also heading straight across to build a house there. Certainly a smart move to get some boots on the ground, as they say. Meanwhile, has Grim gone for a transport ship yet? I believe he's got one on the boil. And he is doing some fishing scouting. So he's found Zach Frennet's island, although probably can't positively identify it as such just yet, given the strange nature of the central island. But he'll probably figure it out soon enough if his fishing ship continues in the direction it's going. So Grim has landed here on the northernmost part of the central island. He will possibly run afoul of this bear, but he does have a loom, so he needn't be too concerned about that. Now, he's got his villagers doing some scouting here, but he hasn't actually moved his own scout over. Now, I suspect he might be leaving that on his home island there, just on a constant patrol against any potential landings. Meanwhile, the villagers on the north did have a minor amount of bear trouble. So we now know that Grim has an idea of this northern area. Let's see where Zach Frennet's villagers have gotten to on the same island. So they're more in the middle, south of the neck, as Mercury Frost wisely coined the term, most appropriately. Some sheep scouting happening here. Always a treat to see. Always a treat. Now the question is... Yes, so Zach Frennet's actual scout is approximately 20,000 miles away from Grim's troops to the north. So it seems like both players, having now arrived on the mainland, will probably not encounter one another for a little bit at least, until perhaps their fishing ships or Zach Frennet's scout eventually gets to the northern part of the island and finds Grim's location. I would have to say, though, at this early juncture, the landing positions favor Zach Frennet, because if he simply does a quick wall across the upper portion of the neck, getting this golden stone behind his walls, then he immediately can lay claim to an enormous amount of territory, and for the Britons, crucially, an enormous amount of wood. Now, that said, at this early juncture, there is nothing to stop Grim from simply piling some additional villagers onto another transport ship and sending them down to the southern part of the map if he realizes that Zach Frennet is in the middle. Will he realize that, though, is the question. Ideally speaking, that scout should probably be on the mainland, sussing this out, although his transport ship here may well locate Mr. Frennish. Ooh, just shy. Just shy. He may be considering this as a landing area. If so, he could be in a little bit of trouble if he runs straight into Zach's villagers. At this point, though, both players in the feudal age with not much in the way of military forces, probably nothing to worry about just yet. So Zach Frennet has some archers on the boil, you would imagine, in that archery range, which will be a fairly solid defense of this territorial gain he's made here. A barracks arriving in the north for Grim. It looks like we're going to see a little bit of a naval set too. Or perhaps not. Just passing, exactly. Here comes Grimm's archery range, certainly settling in the north there. He'll probably be a little bit concerned that he hasn't really run into any significant resources yet, although as we mentioned earlier, he still has plenty of plum gold mines left at home, so he won't be too concerned about that just yet, although the real issue is if Zach Frennet begins exploiting those central resources before Grimm can effectively claim them, then they will be lost, and that will take more of a long-term effect into the late game. So we see Zach Frennet engaging in some wanton slaughter with his scout cavalry here. Now, ordinarily speaking, you might expect a loomed villager to be fine against a scout like this, but Zach Frennet has upgraded his scouts, but of course, still no match for the pointy boys. Excellent town centre placement from Zach Frennet as he hits the castle age. Right in the middle of an enormous amount of wood, plus effectively claiming the southern resources in the central island, which he will be keen to get a hold of and be able to defend as well with this town centre. So it looks like Zach Frennet has lost some fishing ships. Repeat, lost some fishing ships. But still plenty of targets for Grimm's fleet over here, if he is so inclined. It looks like he is not so inclined, however. Perhaps at this juncture he's more inclined towards scouting with this fleet. However, if he runs into this demolition ship, he'll certainly not be pleased. He's turning around. Perhaps he's wise to it. A forward castle now by Zach Frennet, which will certainly hem Grimm in the north here. Meanwhile, Grimm's fleet has returned to engage in some piracy. That demolition ship is sailing to the rescue. Only one fishing ship lost, nothing too concerning. One demolition ship not enough, but Grimm's fleet not taking chase at this point, not taking chase. He probably considers the castle to be something of a bigger problem. I take it back. He has not yet seen the castle, which is definitely going to pose a problem for him. The longer that castle goes unopposed, well, he's seen it now. Some additional villagers joining the northern forces, or he's rethought it. He doesn't like that castle, and he's going to move them further south. Meanwhile, Zach Frennet cheerfully exploiting the northernmost resources, which he has secured with this castle. He can exploit the southern resources at his leisure. Meanwhile, Grimm is running into yet more trouble in the south as Zach Frennet extremely fortuitously intercepts his attempted landing. Grimm's Janitours are looking for some villagers to raid. The villagers they found in the north are well defended by the castle. The villagers they'll find in the south, defended by town centre, although he has resumed his landing. It appears that these crossbowmen didn't scare them off very much, and this castle drop will actually prove fairly effective in terms of threatening, or acting at the very least, as a base from which to threaten this town centre, which in its current location is rather isolated from Zach Frenet's main production areas to the north. So, probably a good castle location by Grimm. Zach Frennet must not be aware of it because he could probably deny it fairly easily if he was so inclined. Meanwhile, a bear threatens to deny Zach Frennet a castle. Not really, but comical. So, actually, Grimm does not yet know that he's got a good castle location here. Once it's built, it should give the... No, it doesn't actually give enough visibility. So some rams then from Grimm to attack the northern castle. Unfortunately unsupported, they're easily bested by these knights. But I do seem to recall at some point Grimm had a spearman or two knocking around in the north. He's certainly queued up 7 of them now, so they'll be able to effectively back that ram up against knights. You might want to build another ram or two, however, before moving in. Meanwhile, in the south, Grimm has begun to bind some much-needed wood with his villagers here. No doubt keen at this point to build another town centre, which he has thus far not been able to do, except for in the north. So those knights on a suicidal scouting mission. Meanwhile, these Janitours probably need to be moved back. There they go. Siege workshop in the south here as well. The town centre no longer is isolated, as I mentioned earlier, with this castle on an imposing and well-positioned hilltop. Who has water control? It's a good question. I would definitely say Grimm, although not really exploiting it, as Zach Frennet is being allowed to continue to fish. Nobody really making use of the water, although Grimm's own fishing fleet, which is considerable, is unchallenged, which is certainly proving a boon for him if you take a look at his food in the bank. And in fact, you would have to say all of that food is being put to obvious use if we take a look at the stats at the bottom here. The fish boom is real. We have a population discrepancy that is worth mentioning, my friends. It's 100 to 63 and dropping. It's dropping on both sides, though. Grim is launching an offensive on two fronts. A ram is going after the town centre in the south, and we've got two rams going after the castle in the north. A two-pronged offensive. It looks like the northern offensive will succeed, and that castle will go down. It's a good question from the stream. Generally speaking, there are not different kinds of castles. It's primarily different models. You could argue, though, that there are a couple of strange cases like the Krepost, which is like a mini castle. And there are also the standard watchtowers, which essentially function like micro castles. But generally speaking, the big, bulky castle model there just has different skins. And they all generally cost the same amount of stone as well, although some civilizations have bonuses which let them buy castles on the cheap. Some civilizations have different bonuses which allow their castles to have more HP. So the northern offensive, very successful. The southern offensive, meanwhile, not losing any steam. I have to say, with the addition of this mangonel, which outranges the town centre, Zach Frennet is got to be concerned as to what he can do here. His scouts will probably take out the mangonel, but there is another one on the boil, which they won't take out. And it looks like that town centre could be in trouble. He is repairing it at great cost. Meanwhile, both players now... Meanwhile, Grim in the Imperial Age. Zach Frennet not in the Imperial Age. And certainly nowhere near the Imperial Age in terms of resources. That said, there is a considerable villager discrepancy between the two. 70 villagers to just under 50 from Zach Frennet, which is probably the source of Grim's fairly impressive Imperial Age time there. So Grim has now retaken control of the resources in the neck and is now advancing on Zach Frenet's monastery to claim the relic housed therein. This holy man, one would have to assume, not long for this world. Now we do have a naval ploy by Zach Frennet here, although given the amount of pressure happening on the mainland, I'm not certain I would have invested into the Navy at this junction. Paused the game. Zach Frennet has paused the game, whether to catch his breath or because he's experiencing technical difficulties remains to be seen. It is a good point there in chat. Why are the ships from both players repeatedly sailing past defenseless fishing ships? We've seen a couple of mediocre fishing raids, but neither player's fish economy was decimated in the early game. I think Zach Frennet was eventually killed by Grim. I'm not seeing a lot of grey dots around his island anyway, at least. So now Grim has paused the game. Now, even though the game is paused, ordinarily if we were players, we wouldn't still be able to move around the map, but as spectators, we suffer no such limitations, and we can continue to study the map. And we'll take a look at each player's home base, because, as we've noted, there is a significant villager disparity between the two, and I imagine the home base boom must be what is fueling Grimm's boom, because, as we saw, he did struggle to get an initial foothold on the main island. A struggle which is now very much turned into a major offensive. So we are seeing quite an amount of wood miners here in Grimm's home base. Not a lot of farms, but of course we must remember he has an enormous amount of fishing ship available. So a huge food-based fish economy. Five fire ships. Note that the Britons, I believe, do not get fast fire ships, so this is probably as good as they can muster in terms of navy. What their target is expected to be, unfortunately, I do not know. On the mainland here, we are seeing castles, we're seeing production buildings, we're seeing a new town centre going up over here in the west. Plenty of space yet for a retreat, but it has to be said, not a lot of villagers left on the mainland now for Zach. So that's going to be tough. He is researching ballistics in the university, which will certainly benefit his archers. Although I don't believe he has many archers at the moment. The military statistics there at the bottom certainly painting a chilling picture in terms of Zach Frenet's survivability. We've got 51 military units to 13, nearly a 5-to-1 military advantage. Yeah, looking at Zach Frenet's economy here, I'm not seeing any major problems with his home base economy versus Grimm's. I think really the major difference is the sheer number of fishing ships that Grimm successfully deployed. And although his initial arrival onto the north was fraught with peril, he did get that town centre up and running fairly early on, and that added to the production of villagers which are now well placed exploiting this resource cluster here in the neck. So I'm hearing from the chat there that Grimm might be experiencing some technical difficulties, which would be a shame considering he's the one with such a commanding lead strategically as well as based on the score. He is currently the one who's paused, so it seems like it's possible. We remain in the dark. Some more fire ships from Zach Frenet in the corner here. If I had to guess, I would say at this point his military is 90% ship-based. Repeat, 90% ship-based. An excellent plug there from Ross Frenet for the Baldo.ie store. Naturally, the Baldo Invitational Tournament certainly supports the purchasing of any merchandise from the Baldo store. All of the profits go directly to Baldo himself, the bold man whom we all love and trust, and who commands our respect and admiration from across the world. So Zack with 6 idle villagers, Grim with 7. Again, fairly close overall. You'd have to say it's the fishing ships that really make the difference. So Grim's arrived in the stream chat there now, so he assures us that the game was eventually unpaused, so we could probably actually fast forward. I realize I do have a fast forward button. Fast forwarding doesn't work for pauses, I'm being told. Yes, I'm beginning to think that there may be a spectation issue, so we might not see the thrilling finale, but I think we could all predict the outcome here. Well, since the stream is clearly not going to catch up to this pause, we'll take a quick look at the statistics. Obviously, as you've just seen in the chat there, it's 1-0 to Grim, and Zach Frennett has called good game shortly after our little pause incident, so we'll take a look at the statistics, which largely, as expected, favor Grim. We have units kill to loss ratio of 2 to 1, very nice. Buildings raised 9. Buildings lost 1. Largest army 51. Certainly not the slugfest that we might have liked to see. But all in all, an interesting outing for match 1, I think. A shame about the technological issue. Some relatively respectable feudal age times there. A very nice castle age time from Zach Frennett. Meanwhile, in society, that 70 to 55 villager high, primarily sourced in fishing ships, I believe. And there's the timeline. So, I believe the two players are heading straight into round 2 of 7. So, let's get our multiplayer up and running. Looks like they haven't started just yet. But we are ready to go. And we will have to see, remembering, of course, that both players still have 2 mulligans left apiece. So, if either of them draw a Civ combo they don't like, or if their opponent draws a Civ that they are particularly skilled with, they can always call a mulligan. And here we have it. So apparently Zach Frenna was having a lag issue in round 1. Perfect. So it looks like round 2 is starting, so we'll get straight into it. Looks like it's 4 lakes this time. 4 lakes. And it's going to be the Goths versus the Vietnamese. You'd have to say Zach Frenna will be happy drawing the Goths after a round 1 loss. Nothing settles the nerves than a barracks spawning hundreds of thousands of Huskarl. So, we've got Zach Frennet in the grey with the Goths. We've got Grim in the blue with the Vietnamese. If you're just tuning in, this is game 2 of 7 of the Baldo Invitational Tournament Grand Final for Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition. We're saying in chat that there is a risk that Grim might call a mulligan, considering he's up against the Goths, but he is playing as the Vietnamese, who are not too terrible. Ross Frennet disagrees. But it is true, he has turned a situation like this around quite spectacularly in round 1. And he may be hungry to do so again. He's got his sheep under the town centre ready to go. Zach Frennet also enjoying some shepherd's pie. Goths are a good civilization to use against an archer civilization. So the Vietnamese being archer focused is why people are saying that there is a chance of a mulligan. Of course, for those of you who weren't there or who didn't see the video, Grim did defeat the strongest seeded player in the tournament, our 2-time former champion Johnny Bongo, himself ironically an archer civilization expert. Johnny Bongo at the time in round 1 playing the Goths, and was Grim playing the Vietnamese that time as well? I think he might have been. And he turned it around. So we'll see if he can manage another upset. He's clearly eager to do so. So here's one of Grim's famous boar lures. You'll see if it looks like he's vastly improved on his methods from previous rounds. Even in the last semi-final he was in, we were seeing boar lures with boars hundreds of miles away from the town centre when they died. This is a much more efficient process. For those of you not familiar with boar luring, these boars have the tusks and the temperament to kill any villager who tries to attack them. Therefore, you need to send a single villager on the perilous task of shooting at a boar, running back to the town centre, so that your remaining villagers can then kill it safely. We can see Zach Frennet has also accomplished a very successful boar lure, with his boar ending up plumb under his town centre, always nice to see. And he'll probably be ready to lure his second boar in just a moment, and we'll have the distinct pleasure of watching that. Meanwhile, Grim is already luring his second boar before his villagers finished eating his first boar. Not maximum efficiency, it has to be said, not maximum efficiency, but he didn't lose any villagers, so that's the important thing. And he had very little idle time. Meanwhile, Zach Frennet heading for his second boar now. His villagers already have Loom researched. Loom gives his villagers a little bit of bonus hit points, which makes luring boars a much less risky prospect. Obviously, it's considered to be an unmitigated disaster for a villager to die in the early game whilst luring a boar. Now, I'm only mentioning that for posterity because we would obviously never expect to see such an absolute catastrophe happen in tournament finalist level play. So here comes Grimm's Scout. We'll take a look at the fog of war and see what he's seeing. So he's successfully identified Zach Frennett's location here. He's probably now looking around to try and find where his wood miners are, which will prove a likely target for him in the feudal age, which is just what happened to Johnny Bongo in round 1. So he would love to locate those wood miners. Let's take a look at Zach Frennett's view. He's yet to locate Grim. On the map. He is looking though, and that scout will probably locate the foe in short order. He has got some fish economy up and running though. Perhaps he's learned the glory of the salmon from the previous game. Are these salmon? They are. Salmon and snapper, if I do identify those little red ones correctly. So, moving back then to the full view, it actually looks like he hasn't moved his scout into Grimm's area, which is unfortunate. His scout instead returning to his own environs. Possibly on auto scout. The auto scout can be a little bit inefficient, but it certainly saves you a lot of microing. So, Zach Frennett building some walls here, probably realizing that if he is going to win this game, he needs to get into the Castle Age and he needs to get Huskarls up and running. So to do that, he needs to survive any early rushes that Grimm might be planning. And as we know, Grimm is no stranger to an early rush, even in the Dark Age. We've got a Galwegian in the chat. I was under the impression that I was the only Galway person online, so that's delightful to see. The Jewel of the West, as they call it. The Jewel of the West. Meanwhile, Grimm going for his usual, it has to be said, remarkably wood-intensive house wall here. Certainly a cost in wood that is unsettlingly high, but he will use all those houses in short order. He's already on 33 population, so it's not as though it's a waste of wood. It's just certainly an interesting choice over palisade walls. I believe Spirit of the Law had an interesting video on it as to whether you should use houses or straight up palisades as walls. A video full of maths for those of you who enjoy maths. KG play from both players so far. Although we see that Grimm is planning that feudal age rush. He's got barracks, he's got archery range. He does have a hill to climb, but Zach Frennett's defenses are they're a little fairly far back to take full advantage of that, it has to be argued. Yes, one does like the natural look of the palisade wall, I think. Of course, if we're just comparing the walls in terms of their defensive capabilities, one major problem is that Grimm's is essentially about to be completed. It is extremely tight. He's certainly not giving himself much space, but that's easily rectified if he succeeds in his offensive. So now Zach Frennet has successfully located Grimm's base, and he's even taken out one of his villagers with his classic upgraded scout trick, which he employed in the last round as well. And once again, Grimm is countering with a spear boy, a pointy boy, and we'll expect Zach Frennet to lose the scout in a mirror of what we saw happening in the last game on the northern shores of the Middle Island. So Grimm's villager will survive to continue building this archery range. So that's 2 archery ranges and a barracks. And no military queued up by Grimm just yet. Meanwhile, Zach Frennet is queuing up some military. Some men-at-arms here coming in from Zach Frennet. Grimm now queuing up 10 archers. Repeat, 10 archers. That won't go well if they start getting their numbers up against these men-at-arms. That will be more than enough to secure this area. Here are the first 2 archers. And it's not looking good. Two more archers now. Grimm wisely placing their creation points at the back, although he's wisely using the hill advantage here now. The hill advantage, by the way, for those who may not be aware, will give these archers double damage against anyone they are firing on who is at a lower elevation than they are. Zach Frennet now wisely withdrawing from this unfavorable engagement, which is allowing Grimm to mass his archers on the hill, a precarious position. They'll come here now and drive these men-at-arms away from the barracks. Oh, they're attacking. That's not going to go well. You can see the significant effects of the hill bonus there. They made mincemeat of those men-at-arms. Very effective use of the hill. There is a wandering man-at-arms 20,000 miles away from his home. Although, I suppose he has a little bit of a holiday home here. Certainly he's away from the action. Meanwhile, Zach Frennet has something of a back base here. Sorry, this is Grimm's. Grimm has something of a back base here. That is alarming. If I were Zach Frennet, I would not like to be hemmed in like that on both sides. Enemy production buildings in every direction. He's not aware of it yet, though. Not aware of the northern little base yet. He's got bigger concerns, and those bigger concerns are knocking a hole in his palisade wall as we speak. It looks like Grimm's attack has come just a little bit too early. And we may be seeing a repeat of round 1, Grimm v Johnny Bongo, as Grimm marches his archers around Zach Frenet's base looking for likely targets. Now, obviously, the major difference, as Ross Frennet wisely points out in chat there, is that whilst Zach Frennet is under significant pressure on the land here, he does have a significant amount of water-based economy there getting fish. It seems Grimm is aware of this, though, and his death squads are closing in on the docks, and they will wait for those fishing ships to return to the docks and snipe them as they come into port. These archers do not have great range just yet. Only range 5, so you can see they are struggling to get those kills as the fishing ships deposit their food. Zakfrenet is now in the Castle Age as well. And he is knocking up a castle in a nice rear defensible position here, which will allow his wood line to be secure in addition to his stone here. So again, it has to be said that although Grimm has a sizable force of archers here, they are struggling to find an effective target. It's a 30-3 military deficit here. It's a 3-1, sorry, it's a 10-1 numerical advantage that Grimm is enjoying, militarily speaking. And yet, his archers are struggling to locate any significant targets. Now, they've got some wood miners here, but I think they've only managed to kill one. And I have to say, I have to point out at this juncture that villager-wise, there's only one villager in it. Oh, the archers are coming in. That town bell needs to be rung immediately. And it is. And the archers are going to take enormous damage from these towers. That's not an advisable course of action by Grimm. And now there's some Huskarl. But this is going to be very, very bad for these archers. Carnage. A defeat on a scale not seen since Thermopylae, except this time Leonidas was victorious and the Persians were routed. Scandalous. A loss of life not seen since the First World War. And now, it's all to play for. Zakfrenet building his second town centre to continue booming. Remember, thanks to his fishing economy, he is still neck on neck, economically speaking, with Grimm, and that second town centre will allow him to seal that in. Grimm, realizing that this game is now going to go on and will not be decided with his rush, building a couple of docks here to start getting this fish for himself. Zakfrenet does have a forager down here who hasn't noticed that the fish are going up, which is a shame because that would have posed a lovely little target for a Huskarl raid. Although Zakfrenet is probably more concerned with eliminating the local production buildings that Grimm has. So Grimm still has Zak's home base surrounded with production buildings, and it looks like he's now reacted appropriately to the building of Huskarl. Longswordsmen, certainly the appropriate counter for Huskarl. Maybe not better than them as we speak. It's 11, 2 and 8 versus 9 and 1. So the Huskarl is still certainly the stronger unit, but obviously longswordsmen, once ultimately fully upgraded to champions in the Imperial Age, and with all of the appropriate blacksmith upgrades, are superior to elite Huskarls. So the Huskarls still with the advantage right now. It just is a matter of whether they will be put to good use. Now, it has to be said as well that Zakfrenet does not have a significant mass of Huskarls built up just yet. They'll certainly make short work of these innocent gold miners. Meanwhile, Grimm's second major assault of the day is now beginning, as he marches that unit of longswordsmen into Zakfrenet's base, which, it has to be said, probably should have been re-walled up. Zack Frennet is probably aware that these long swordsmen will make short work of his town center, and he attempts to repair it. No, I certainly wouldn't recommend that. So by attempting to repair that town center, he has resulted in the repairing villagers dying rather horrifically, although he did buy his Huskarl time to arrive, but I have to say I don't believe that they'll arrive in sufficient numbers to change much. So the town center is lost. Sadly, many of the villagers who were working around it are also lost. Meanwhile, there is an extremely mild attack happening on Grimm's own hometown center, which is now over, although he will live to fight another day. So now it must be said that, much like in his semi-final match, Zack Frennet does have a fairly decentralized economy. So he has his fishing ships here, which are now actually under threat by a watchtower, so they will eventually be sniped more effectively than the archers we saw earlier. But he does also have some fishing ships here, which are now in danger of these fire gullies, so Grimm is wise to that. And he actually also has fishing ships in this corner as well. So that's why Zack Frennet still has an enormous amount of food in the bank. Unfortunately, food in the bank is not going to do much against long swordsmen on the field. And he doesn't have the gold to back up the food, so he can't pump out Huskarls as he probably would like to. That said, Grimm is certainly not using these long swordsmen as effectively as we would prefer. He did lose quite an amount of them in that assault on that castle. To be fair, he probably wasn't aware that the castle was there before they moved in. Does Gaius see what Zack has? We'll switch over to Gaius' view. Yes, Guy has excellent scouting, it has to be said. Extremely good view of the map and what Zack has. Yes, he essentially has almost complete visibility. He does have a lot of towers and buildings and such dotted around the place as well. Zack's own visibility, not too bad, but a little bit more limited. Another castle going up for Zack in his former city center. It is a constant stream of aggression from Grimm, it has to be said, which is probably the key tactical difference here in this game. When he lost his original force of archers, one would have imagined under normal circumstances that would have afforded Zack Frennet some breathing room, but instead he knocked up 4 barracks and resumed the attack almost immediately. Even the fishing lakes are not immune from the warfare, with fishing fleets on both sides being scorched with Greek fire. So at this juncture, we're seeing a much more severe population difference in terms of villagers. Grimm has certainly pulled into a decisive lead in terms of economy, 74 villagers to 36. And a lot of those villagers that Zach has are idling, because a lot of them are fishing ships, and a lot of them are currently being burnt to a crisp by Grim. Meanwhile, his main base remains effectively under siege. He is defending, and he actually will have a fairly healthy kill-death ratio in his favor against Grim, but I think, ultimately speaking, it is difficult to see how Zach Frennet could get himself out of this sticky situation. Now, he does have another, it should be said, town centre up and running, unmolested by Grim, over on the western side of the map. I have to agree with the chat there. The arrival of those longswordsmen, considering that both players had equal numbers of villagers at the time, the arrival of those longswordsmen was almost unbelievable. I certainly have to admit, I did not expect it. I didn't anticipate that Grim would be able to muster the resources to build longswordsmen that quickly and in those numbers. That said, it has to be pointed out that longswordsmen are actually fairly cheap. So he may well have just sold some wood, some excess wood that he no longer needed for the now ineffective archers play, since Zach was on the Castle Age, and with that gold from the wood, particularly if he was the first to sell wood, he would have possibly been able to afford them that way. But one has to agree, the longswordsman attack really was a turning point. Now that said, if you look at the score is actually telling a remarkable story in terms of what a good job Zach Frennet is doing against all of this pressure. As is the kill-death ratio. Very positive kill-death ratio in favor of Zach Frennet. Certainly Grim is being made to pay for every step he's taken. Zach Frennet now the first player into the Imperial Age. Very impressive, considering the pressure that he has been under. So Zach's northern base is now about to face a considerable threat in the form of these crossbowmen. And there are no Huskarls in this section. Now, as we all know, once the Goths get to the Imperial Age, all they need is the perfusion technology, and they'll be able to build Huskarl from the barracks. So this single barracks here could spam out an enormous amount of Huskarl. Now the only problem with that, of course, is that Zach Frennet doesn't have an enormous amount of food, he doesn't have an enormous amount of gold. He might be able to spam Huskarl, but can he pay for them? Meanwhile, Grim's castle here under heavy assault by trebuchet. He is repairing it. Frankly, I would not recommend repairing it unless he's got a relief army that is capable of taking out the trebuchet. Otherwise, you're just throwing stone away. And it looks like he won't be able to save that castle. So Zach Frennet, with a significant amount of trebuchet here now, will look to clear his lines and stop this perpetual siege which he has found himself under. That will allow him, one would assume is his hope, to get his economy back in order, because all he really needs is a decent food income, a decent gold income, and then he'll have wave after wave of Huskarl. Now Ross Frennet says that Huskarl's not so great against Guy's army comp. Unless he's managed to upgrade those longswordsmen, I would have to respectfully disagree with that. Now, he may well have upgraded them. He's certainly researching plate mail armor, which would imply that he knows what he's doing. He knows he's got to get champions out if he's to best these Huskarl. Meanwhile, Zach Frennet is about to engage in his first offensive of the game here, whilst simultaneously facing what looks to be potentially a disastrous offensive in his essential northern base. So, as Ross Frennet rightly predicted, we do have champions now in play. Zach Frennet's villagers will be forced to flee, but unfortunately they will find themselves under a hail of crossbow bolts, which will significantly hamper their ability to escape. Meanwhile, Zach Frennet will take some pleasure in noting that his own offensive has been equally successful, with Grimm's castle and town centre having been reduced to rubble by a relatively small army. Grimm certainly facing the problem of not being able to be everywhere at once. It looks like a sizable amount of Zach Frennet's villagers will try at least to escape to this general area, although Grimm is trying to cut them off as best he can. Quite amusing, actually. We've got these villagers fleeing west, whilst these villagers are fleeing east. Now, the real question is, can this army be bested? Zach Frennet has been able to win numerically unfavorable engagements in the past. If this castle goes up, it's on a hill, it could be good. He's going to buy himself some time with these Huskarl. It will go up. It's an excellent castle location. Now it has to be said he does not have chemistry just yet. He will try to repair this castle, even though... and there it is. He's called good game, and indeed, without his northern base bolstering his economy, the villager discrepancy is fairly insurmountable, and he doesn't have any food left in the bank. In addition, one has to say that those champions would have been very difficult for the Goths to counter, at the very least with Zach's resources. The best he could hope for would be to pump out Huskarl, and Huskarl are simply not good enough against upgraded champions. So that's it. Round 2 of 7 now complete in this final. A much closer game than the previous one, which was itself a fairly close game, considering Zach Frennet's early taking of that island. So another close one. But we have Zach Frennet perhaps a little off balance now with 2 losses on the trot. We'll have to take a little look at the statistics, of course, because I think they're going to be a little less one-sided than we usually see in a 1v1. Indeed, we see Zach Frennet actually winning the military star for his incredible defense. We've got units killed 145 versus 99 for Grimm. Largest army 21. Largest army 21, units killed 145. Now that is quite a statistic, one has to say. Next, the economy. Unsurprisingly, the stats all go to Grimm. We've got Some relatively reasonable age-up times there. Society, Villager High, 109 versus 70. At least we got more of a game out of the boys this time around. And there's the timeline for those who are interested. Certainly a massive discrepancy here coming into the Castle Age, and this is where Grimm's enormous amount of archers met their demise. Always nice to see. So let's see if round 3 is up and running as of yet. We are not yet seeing round 3 up and running. Plenty of maps to choose from. Plenty of civ combinations to enjoy. One would have to say that despite Grimm's early lead in this 7-match series, it's still certainly anyone's game. Very close matches in rounds 1 and 2. Now the heat is really picking up here in scenic Galway, the Jewel of the West. We've got a situation here where we're in the loft on a 3rd-story apartment, and all of the heat from the day has risen up and been trapped by my roof, reducing me to dust. So we've got claims in the chat that Zach is not tilted. Repeat, not tilted. Certainly interesting to me. A bold claim. A bold claim. So I can see people desperately tagging Johnny Bongo, who certainly would have liked to have, probably not have liked to have seen that last round, considering it was almost a mirror image of his own disastrous failings in round 1. Certainly, Zach Frenna put up a little bit more of a fight than he did. So now we have Budapest. Oh, now then, Budapest. This will be something to watch. So this is interesting. Usually Budapest, as far as I've seen it, is going to be an east-west divide. This time we've got a north-south divide. We've got Budapest. We've got Zach in the blue as the Cumans, and we've got Grimm as the red in the north as the Britons. Now, immediately there are some extremely unusual things happening with this matchup, and I have to say I wouldn't be surprised if there were a mulligan called by Grimm. So first of all, for those of you who may not be familiar, we do straight away have the obvious irregularity of the Budapest map, which is that both players start with double their normal starting situation. They've got 2 town centres, double the amount of villagers, double the amount of starting resources, and that's for both players. So they both immediately have twice the amount of opening game maneuvers to accomplish. In the north, however, and the reason that we're pondering whether or not Grim would consider a mulligan is purely because the Cumans have an additional civilization bonus which allows them to build an extra town center in the feudal age. Furthermore, they can also build a siege workshop and build rams in the feudal age. So the fact that they can do this, and the fact that they've already, in this case because of Budapest, started with an extra town centre, means that in the feudal age, Zach Krennic could be enjoying not one, not two, but 3 town centres, which is almost unprecedented. Additionally, another common feature of Budapest, particularly in 1v1s like this, is that the opposing players will start extraordinarily close to one another. One has to imagine that these wood miners here can probably hear these wood miners chopping and whistling as they go about their workday just a few miles north of them. So let's take a look at the Fogs of War. We'll see what the players have uncovered. Zach Krennic going for a double boar lure. Both town centers will be enjoying some delicious hog sandwiches this evening. So Zach Krennic has obviously discovered Grimm's eastern town center over here. He has yet to discover his western one, but he does see these berries here, so he can probably put 2 and 2 together and realize where that is likely to be. Meanwhile, Grim, on the other hand, who has also got a tasty boar plum under his town center, as we always like to see. He has not gone for the double boar as Zach Krennic has. He probably has only just noticed his boar over there is why. Meanwhile, he knows Zach Krennic's eastern town center, and once again, whilst he hasn't overtly scouted it, he can probably estimate where his western town center is, and indeed this scout is probably likely to run into it in short order anyway. So another boar lure happening here by Zach Krennic. Very successful, although again it has to be said, the villagers already have loom. Personally, I like the thrill of hunting a boar without the benefit of an advanced Dark Age weaving apparatus to aid me. So Zach Krennic very controversially and perhaps in an arrogant move, putting all of his villagers here on delicious boar and leaving this delicious lamb to rot in the sun. For those who are unfamiliar on the stream, if an animal that has been slaughtered by a villager goes unexploited, its food count will slowly go down until it is no longer exploitable. So this sheep is literally wasting food away in the sun, whilst Zach enjoys the boar instead. Meanwhile, over on the other town center, we can see that the second boar has already long since been eaten, if I'm not missing it. Meanwhile, Zach is immediately going for fish yet again. Fish has served him well now in the last game, and it probably will serve him again in this. Grim not yet building any docks. Not yet building any docks. He had a very strong fishing economy in game 1. We can see once again Grim's traditional wall of houses in the north here. Traditional wall of houses. And a corresponding mirror wall of houses over here on the western side. So Zach Frennett's already clicked up to the feudal age, and he's got 3 fishing ships on the boil. Meanwhile, Grim not yet clicking up to the feudal age. A few more villagers than Zach Frennett, and a couple more to be built. He has now gone and built a dock and will build some fishing ships. And now he's clicked up to the feudal age. Zach Frennett, meanwhile, already in the feudal age. We can probably expect him to be building that Cumin town centre, and we'll have to keep a very close eye and see where he chooses to build it, because that will be integral. Now he's already built a tower here, so it looks like the aggro is going to happen in the east. Repeat, the east. The sword of Damocles will fall here. Here come the villagers to build another tower. When will the town centre go up, is the question. Meanwhile, Grim building a forward barracks here in the west. We could be looking at some aggro over here to compensate. It has to be said that Zach Frennett's own home bases are completely undefended. They don't have walls. Well, this one kind of has a bit of a house wall, but not completed. Certainly a villager kerfuffle here. They don't stop the tower, though. And Zach Frennett simply garrisons in the tower and will now punish Grim for bringing those villagers forward. Grim having now reached the feudal age himself. So it's all aggro early on here, as you would expect from a Cumin's player. Another tower. Still no sign of that town centre. Meanwhile, Grim's production buildings are edging southwards here on the other side. He's not rattled. He's got this town in his sights. These villagers are probably going to run afoul of it. We'll see if they can see it yet. Just about. Some commanding tower placements here by Zach Frennett up on the hill. A defensive tower there by Grim, but unfortunately not forward enough to stop the construction work. This siege workshop now capable in this feudal age of adding rams to the mix. As we mentioned earlier, this is one of the Cumin's benefits. Meanwhile, the battle on the other side has begun. We do have some villagers coming forward here, and there are some sizable amount of archers here to back them up. Zach Frennett will build some watchtowers. There's only one archer down here, though. He won't be enough to stop this tower going up, and that tower could be pivotal. Remembering, of course, that Grim does not have the luxury of a ram to take this tower out, so that could significantly impede these archers and secure this gold. Great tower placement. The reason those archers didn't rush in and stop that tower going up, by the way, is because Grim is probably distracted by this ram rush, and there's the game. Or maybe there isn't the game. Apparently it was an internet issue. It did seem like a premature point at which to call good game, considering Grim's western base was unsullied. So we may just have to wait a little bit and see what the story with the internet is. It should be pointed out that as long as Zach Frennett didn't drop, he'll be able to restore this game. and the players should ideally be able to resume from where they were. No, this won't count. They'll be able to resume this game. So I think, does anybody know, do they already have a restore lobby up? Okay, there's already a restore lobby up, so we'll quit out. We won't look too closely at the statistics. We'll keep those for afterwards. We'll pop into multiplayer, and we will await the restoration. I certainly hope we won't be waiting long enough to justify streaming that game ever again. So I don't know if you guys can hear that enormous amount of noise in the background, but while we're waiting, I'm taking a well-deserved fan break. I've turned on my fan, and it is currently blowing a gale force wind directly into my face, which is very enjoyable. I will turn it off when the game resumes proper naturally. So I think I see some people joining fresh. For those of you who are just joining us, we are currently waiting on the resumption of match 3 of 7. Oh, apparently we are not waiting on the resumption of match 3 or 7. I am hearing that Grim has forfeited match 3, repeat, forfeited, making it 2-1 to Grim. So, for those of you who are tuning in, this is going to be going in then to match 4 of 7 in a 7-game series. So, Grim there popping into the chat. Welcome, Grim. I assume we're about to set up for match 4, unless either of you are running out of steam, or unless there are some technological issues. Okay, excellent. We are going ahead. So we're about to go into match 4 of 7 of this, the grand final of the Baldo Invitational Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition tournament. So this will be quite exciting. It's 2-1 currently to Grim, who won the first 2 games in a row, and then, after some technical issues, it has to be said, forfeited to what was a very well executed Cumin Ram Rush by Zach Frenish. So let's see if the match is up and running yet. It is up and running. So let's go straight into it. Match 4 of 7, Baldo Invitational Grand Finale. And it's Team Islands. We're getting some great maps tonight. I'm loving it. All right, let's take a look. Ooh. Deep and crisp and even is how I would describe these islands. Actually, I say that, but is it just me, or is Grimm's Island slightly bigger than Zach's? I'd be a little bit peeved. Of course, he has no way of knowing at this early junction. So we've got in the blue Zach Frennet as the Slavs, in the red Grimm as the Berbers. Repeat, Berbers. No mulligans from either player as of yet in the entire series. Both players have 2 mulligans. Oh wait, we've got a pause from Zach Frennet. Is he mulliganing? It must have been a mulligan, I assume. It's a mulligan. So Zach Frennet mulliganed. Obviously he didn't want to play as the Slavs, or alternatively he didn't want Grimm to play as the Berbers, or perhaps he just didn't want to play on Team Islands. And yes, perhaps he did know about Grimm's extremely luxuriantly thick island over here. So I imagine they're not going to beat around the bush, so let's not either, and let's get straight back into multiplayer, back into spectate, and see if they've got the redo up. So that's one of Zach Frennet's 2 mulligans used. Repeat, 1 of 2 used. He's got 1 left. Grimm still has 2 mulligans left in the bank. We'll see if he uses them or not. So while we're waiting for the game to be restarted, I wonder, is there any way we could get Baldo himself to make an appearance, perhaps for the final match? He's probably sound asleep, but it is a Friday night. There is a chance he could be awake. Maybe somebody could send him the link on WhatsApp just to see if he's interested in making a special guest appearance to his own tournament. Here we go. Let's see what they get this time. Golden Swamp. And it's the Malay versus the Huns. So Zach Frennet in the blue as the Malay. Grimm as the red player, as the Huns. So obviously, for those unfamiliar, as the name implies, in Golden Swamp, the main feature of the map is this large swamp in the middle, full of gold, and this time it looks like Grimm might have mulliganed. I do know that he doesn't generally care for these kind of maps. He did put Wolf Hill on his ban list, which is a map that has a lot of relics in the center, so he might not like that irregularity, or maybe he's just sick of all the water maps. But I imagine that was another mulligan there for Grimm. It was. He didn't want to face the melee. I can empathize with that. I can empathize with that. Alrighty. Let's go back. So that's one mulligan used by each player at this juncture into match 4. One mulligan left apiece. So with only one mulligan left each, they're going to have to be a little bit more cautious about using them. Well, I think if you just send him the link and get him to log in with Baldo as his name, and then we'll be able to know that it's him. Oh yes, that was my... Maybe it is a little beneath him. I'm not sure how I can get him to join on audio. I'm not sure if a Skype call would work. So Zach is taking a beer break. Probably well deserved at this junction. A little bit of beer to get into game number 4. No, this is no cult, my friend. This is just a simple Age of Empires 2 tournament. I'm not surprised we bored him. He can probably barely keep his eyes open at this late hour, being a shadow of the man we once knew. The man who once carved an ELO table out of nothing but sandstone and blood. Hello, friendly sword from Canada. That's a long ways away from us. Over here in sunny Galway. Well, it's not very sunny right now, although considering the humidity, one would not know much of a difference. But welcome, welcome. So for those just joining, we are waiting for the resumption of round 4 of the Baldo Invitational Grand Final between Grim and Zach Frennett. We've got 2 players in the final of a very long and thrilling tournament. We were probably on the way to seeing a TC drop in the last round, but we didn't quite get there. We had the Cumans drawn against... Who was Guy again in that last round? Anyway, we had a delicious Cuman Ram Rush in the last round. Aha! We're up and running. So here we go. Round 4, Celts versus Huns. And the map is Ravines. Now there's an interesting one. Not one you would often see. Let's take a look. Ooh, hilly. Very interesting topography. Flat, except for these craters and hills that the players are in. Rushing those TCs will not be easy. Repeat, not easy. I can definitely confirm that there is no chicken in my vicinity. So in the blue, Zach Frennett as the Celts. And in the red, we've got Grim again as the Huns. Twice in a row he's gotten the Huns. But I think he'll probably be a little happier to play as the Huns against the Celts. Both very strong civilizations, it has to be said, particularly in the Imperial Age. So I'm just taking a look at the starting setups that we have here. Obviously another very interesting quirk that I quite enjoy is that both players have clearly started off with approximately 100 outposts, repeat 100 outposts around their eponymous ravine. So let's take a look at the Fog of War just to see the delicious additional visibility awarded by those outposts. And there it is. Extremely enjoyable, one has to say. Zach Frennett going for his woodline to the extreme rear. Probably a wise decision. We know that Grim will be keen to do some raiding. In fact, here is his scout, and his scout may actually fall prey to the hill bonus. Although it looks like he's survived. And he's actually managed to kill one of Zach Frennett's geese there. A classic tactic by Grim. He does enjoy interfering with the local wildlife. Obviously, this is a tactic that will earn him no fans, but it's not about the fans, it's about what makes Grim happy. And if killing the enemy's geese brings some joy to his blackened heart, then who are we to tell him otherwise? It looks like he's probably missed the woodline there, which is certainly what he is keen to find. We'll just take a look at his view. Yes, he has missed it. He's engaging a little villager kerfuffle, which has to be said, Zach Frennett has yet to invest in Lume. So these villagers could be at risk although it looks like he's got enough of them in this location to see Grimm's scout off. He's trying to bring in his own scout for the scout kill, but it doesn't look like they'll intersect. Grimm's scout will resume his day job and continue scouting. Looking at the population count, it seems that the little scout aggro there, plus possibly a little bit of dinking around over here by the woodline, does seem to have slowed Zach Frennett's start down a little bit. It is 15 villagers to 18 at the moment, 15 to 18. Not a huge discrepancy, but obviously these early games can lead to a continued discrepancy right on into the castle edge, which is what we saw in rounds 1 and 2. Well, not so much round 2 actually, more just round 1. Also, in contrast to the games that we have seen thus far, I should point out that there is no water on this map on this occasion, no water. So neither player will be able to rely on that fish income on this occasion. It's the first strictly land map that we have had this game. So a return journey here by Grimm's scout. Still looking for that precious woodline that he is so desperate to raid once he gets to the feudal age. We all know it. It's practically written all over his face here with the scout, which could be in a bit of trouble. He's not retreating. Well, I thought he had cornered himself there, but he might escape with the skin of his teeth here. Oh, and the scout will escape because Zach Frennet has... Oh, no, incorrect. So in the past we've seen a couple of successful scout raids from Zach Frennet on Grimm because Zach Frennet had upgraded his scouts before raiding. Doesn't seem like that's the case on this occasion, and indeed it's because he's still in the Dark Age, so he doesn't have a blacksmith, so this scout just basic and not strong enough to stand up to a villager with loom. Grimm, meanwhile, heading up to the feudal age with 23 villagers. Repeat, 23 villagers. He is starting to wall himself in. Fairly wide walls in comparison to Grimm's usual style, probably necessitated by the nature of the ravine. He wants to get his walls well outside of that ravine. And of course, this means that we are not being treated to a usual house wall by Grimm. Although we do have a nice little production building center over here. We're seeing some calls early on for Zach, and he has just taken a score lead. He's taken... Well, he's just instantly lost the score lead again because he clicked up to feudal age, but that's all relative. It is neck and neck between the two players score-wise. Again, very little difference now between them in terms of villagers. 27 for Zach Frennet, 25 for Guy. Zach Frennet has taken the villager lead thanks to a longer Dark Age, and he is now almost halfway towards the feudal age. Meanwhile, we are seeing some scouts on the boil from Grimm. scouts on the boil. That'll be interesting. We haven't seen Grim execute a scout raid this evening just yet. It's been archers, it's been men-at-arms, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see how Grim does with the scouts. Welcome, Hops. We've got Grim as the Huns in the red, and we've got Zach in the blue as the Celts. So 2 hefty civilizations here. Both players look like they've got themselves walled in fairly nicely. Zach just closing his walls up here, which will be integral because Grim is probably about, and there we go, to pull the trigger on his budding scout raid. And they're going in exactly the right direction if he wanted to sneak in before these walls are built. What does he see? He doesn't know. He's just lucky. And will they get in? They won't. They won't get in. So he clearly clicked into the base to no avail. And Zach Frenet is safe and sound. They probably were trying to circle back around to the remaining gap, which Zach Frenet has now also sealed in. And having seen the scouts, he is now also building spearmen. So no reason whatsoever for Zach Frenet to be worried about these scouts just yet. And I have to say, to Grim's credit, he certainly hasn't made the mistake of going all in on the scout raid. He has only built this modest unit of 5 scouts to try to rush in and kill some villagers. He hasn't queued up 20 scouts back home. And of course he won't put those scouts to waste either. Now that he knows there's no way in, he's going to try and tear down this house. Of course, Zach Frenet is ensuring that if he does tear down the house, there will only be some pointy boys awaiting him on the other side. Zach Frenet going for a market, possibly aiming for one of his classic fast castles. I believe we saw him do a very breakneck fast castle in round 1. So Zach Frenet destroying his own house there to see these scouts away from his border. Grim, as is traditional, is now building some archery ranges just on the border of his enemies, and so suffice to say, once again the siege begins. Now, unlike the siege we saw in round 2, Zach Frenet has a much more sprawling and more economically viable base on this occasion, with some military production buildings already built. Grim's scouts still looking to cause some consternation anywhere they can. Certainly they've stopped this villager from leaving through the gate and doing some trickery, which is no doubt what the intention was. So Grim is now heading to the Castle Age, whilst Zach Frenet is going for wheelbarrow and some forging upgrade at the blacksmith. Wheelbarrow with a villager population of only 36. According to me, I would say that that's a controversial maneuver. I prefer not to research wheelbarrow until I have a sizable amount of villagers. Sometimes I don't even research it until I'm in the Castle Age and I can continue production of villagers with my second town centre, but I'll leave that up to you guys as to which is the more viable time to research it. So, all in all, Zach Frenet also clicking up to the Castle Age now, not too far behind Grim, much like when they both clicked up to the Feudal Age. And again, very interesting on the economic stats. Only one villager between these two opponents. 37 for Zach Frenish, 38 for Grim. Militarily speaking, we've got 9, 10 now for Zach, and 12 for Grim. Primarily archers and scouts from Grim. Zach Frenish in no rush to face Grim. He'll build some additional forces here, ensuring that these will not get in anytime soon into the base. The scouts, meanwhile, ride off to look for another avenue of entry. Zach Frenish moving his spearmen around to ensure that they will counter the scouts when they get through, although they will need to stay back from those archers, it has to be said. So Zach now queuing up some skirmishers. Meanwhile, Grim is pumping out some knights in significant numbers, I might add. He's got 5 knights on the boil. Repeat, 5. And he's already got 4 on the field. That's significant. And he's got the stables. So that's a significant amount of knights. Now, Zach Frenish has a significant amount of spears, which hopefully he will have the wherewithal to upgrade into pikemen before those knights break through. He's seen those knights now. They're attacking his palisade. Meanwhile, the scouts have broken through in the north. The archers are running straight into skirmishers, and that's a decisive military victory for Zach on the northern front. On the southern front, the knights have broken through. And did he not see that breakthrough? He might have been distracted to the north. So the scouts attack the market, so he's surely seen it now. He's doing some fast walling. Very clever. Very clever. We like seeing it. Now, he hasn't completely stopped those knights, but this town centre will provide enough cover for the time being. So he won't take too many losses here. I think he lost 1 or 2 villagers. 3. And the knights will have to withdraw. Meanwhile, some certain carnage happening over here with these additional knights that Grim has brought in. So, unfortunately, some significant losses by the knights there. So Grim is keen to avoid these engagements on the hill against the town centre's arrows. Perhaps not as keen as he should be, though. Oh, now this is going to be interesting. Zach Frenish with a monastery and another monastery. He is going to try a monk-based defense, and he's happy to let his enemy ride around taking out outposts while he builds those monks. He's in no rush, and as long as Grim doesn't thrash his villagers too heavily, he'll be happy. He's got his villagers back on gold over here. First monk is coming in now. Now Zach Frenish has to be careful here, because with that many knights, Grim can easily prioritize the monk. I would keep the monk on top of the hill and have those villagers ready to get into the town centre. Otherwise he'll be lost. Now we have another monk coming in over here. So Grim is terrified of that monk, and he is running back. Perhaps unnecessarily. But he does know that now that monk is backed up by pikemen. We like to see that. So now Grim is bringing in some cavalry archers and researching Thumbring. So those are certainly capable of sniping the monk. Or the monks, I should now say. As they are being pumped out. We've got 4 monks, I think, on the field now. 2 more on the boil. here's the castle drop from Grimm. Textbook Grimm siege behavior. I would generally be in agreement that that's enough knights to take out the town center, most likely. Although with the monks now relatively in the center, it will be a risky move for them to go for it now. And of course, Grimm is conscious that with those monks, conversions will go straight to his foe. So he's lost one monk, but he is losing knights. And those monks, as long as they're well defended by the pikemen, should be fine. So the pikemen doing some damage, but they have to retreat in the face of the cavalry archers. So it's a 14 to 21 military disadvantage for Zach Frennet at the moment. Not a huge disadvantage, but obviously strategically the position of this castle here, plus Grimm's production buildings right on the border, is far from ideal. Some more cavalry archers coming in here could be enough to overcome the presence of those monks, who are walking into certain doom. Oh, this is not good. Oh dear. Without the monks, it's not looking like a very good situation here for Zach Frennet. We can see that he's not necessarily under a huge amount of economic pressure. He's got resources in the bank. He's got a decent food income still. There is a bit of a villager population discrepancy, of course, because Grimm has been untouched this entire game at home, and that really is where the problem is. Because Zach Frennet has allowed himself to fall under siege in this manner, essentially the control of the game has been with Grimm the entire time. So I can't really see at this point how Zach Frennet can turn it around unless he can get out of his base somehow. And thus far, he has not really shown any signs of being able to do so. So we've got a second castle drop coming in here on the other side of the ravine, no doubt intended to serve as a staging ground for the final assault against the central town centre. And all Grimm really needs to accomplish that is some rams at this juncture, because at the moment Zach Frennet's military forces are largely spent. He's only got 8 units on the field. Grimm meanwhile has more military units on the field, but can't really do anything to finish the job until he gets some siege on the field as well, I would feel. So I don't see any siege workshops around. I feel like a lot of players don't build a siege workshop until the Imperial Age, which I would say, is a bit of a mistake. A lot of players seem to treat the Castle Age as time for raiding, whereas a lot of what are raids could be lethal if they were backed up by a scant few rams, I would say. Now this is very unlucky. Oh, you don't like to see it. You don't like to see it. Certainly dark and desperate times in Zach Frenet's military command, and the mass slaughter of some innocent explorers desperately seeking a better life outside of the sieged base are scheduled for death. Prescription, the likes of which not seen since Mark Antony.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
There goes my echo. Not seen since the likes of Mark Antony and the Second Triumvirate, one would have to say. Some grim tidings here, if you'll excuse the pun. I think we may be looking at a good game situation very shortly, with the villager population reduced to just 33 for Zach Frenesh. 34. He is still building new villagers. It is interesting that in a lot of these games, particularly in the Baldo Invitational tournament thus far, we have seen that it is the early aggressor and the most consistent aggressor who seems to win. However, I have been told that during high-level play, that doesn't always seem to be the case. It would seem that at higher levels, turtling is a viable and often used strategy. It just doesn't seem as though we have seen it used very effectively in this particular tournament. So Grimm's forces marching around, probably keen to avoid a similar situation as in round 2, where Zach had very cleverly evacuated a sizable portion of villagers from his besieged force, his besieged base, and then successfully opened up a new base across the map in a position of safety. So he's probably keen to try and locate and destroy any bug out bases that Zach may have built. Of course, Zach has built some bug out bases, but they're in the top corner, which Grim has not yet scouted, so he probably won't find those anytime soon, although he is searching eagerly. This gold's position here might throw him off, although maybe not. He's found them. And I think this slaughter may well prompt Zach to call it, because without this area, he can't really carry on. Now, once again though, Grimm's armies primarily are raiding forces by nature, as they're not really backed up with siege in any capacity just yet. We are not seeing any siege units on the boil, nor any siege workshops, and I don't really see the game ending unless Zach calls good game without some siege. Now, that said, a GG could well be prompted here with these Tarkans. So I suppose Tarkans, I should say, for the Huns are a decent substitute for siege, to be fair. So Zach is trying to corner those Tarkans with his pikemen, but there are probably too many cavalry archers for the strategy to be effective. He does have the skirmishers, but they are easily bested by the knights, and now the force has to retreat. It was just a bit numerically inferior to take that fight on, unfortunately. Meanwhile, both players have clicked up to the Imperial Age now, with a slight lead for Grimm. Grimm is massing some Tarkans. Now, I suspect once Grimm gets into the Imperial Age, it will simply be a matter of trebuchet, and then good game will follow shortly after. That is, if the Tarkans don't do the job in the meantime. Some unfortunate deaths from those monks there. They should outrange the cavalry archers, but it is a little difficult to judge the ranges on the hill like that, unfortunately. Guy going out of his way to destroy some outposts. We certainly hate to see it. Outposts are buildings of peace, and I certainly deplore any man, woman, or child who defaces or destroys one. So another castle adding to the blockade from Guy, which is now almost completely encircling Zach Frennett's base. Both players now in the Imperial Age. Both players queuing up trebuchet. And to be fair, a trebuchet in the central position here by Zach Frennet would be well able to take out this castle from Grimm, and it would probably bait these Tarkin into a fairly disadvantageous uphill assault, but it actually looks like he's going to go for this castle instead. Meanwhile, Grimm is going for this castle here. I would probably recommend he should go for the town centre, but he's actually leaving that up to the Tarkans instead. So that town bell should be rung, but it's probably not going to get many shots off because the Tarkans are now elite Tarkans, and they will melt that building before anything can be done about it. And surely we are looking now at the end times for our Celtic brethren. So Zach Frennet will no doubt wait until this castle goes down so that he can at least enjoy one brief moment of joy before the inevitable slaughter. He is repairing his own castle here. A valiant defense, it has to be said, despite insurmountable odds. Obviously it is a classy move to defend and put up a decent last stand. He's going to try and take out the trebuchet as well. Certainly a move that I would applaud. Although the pikemen are certainly paying a terrible price. And there it is. GG called, and Zach Frennet has resigned. I say GG Cold, but we can't actually see the chat, or else they just aren't using the in-game chat. Maybe they're using Skype to exchange any good sportsmanship messages that they need to exchange. Let's take a look at these statistics. Let's actually take a brief look before that at Grimm's entirely pristine and unmolested home base. Um, Certainly, these villagers living in a relative paradise compared to the villagers in the ravine on the other side of the map. Pristine, untouched, unblemished, even by a lick of blue on the mini-map. Certainly you'd have to be happy to be one of these villagers. So, let's take a look. Naturally, a fairly one-sided affair compared to, say, Game 2 of this affair. All of the stars here going to Grimm. Significant amount of units killed. Good kill-loss ratio. And a nice few units converted there by Zach Frennett. We probably imagine he would have rathered more units converted given his monk defense strategy, but Grimm was fairly prudent around going anywhere near those monks until he brought the cavalry archers in. And of course, once those cavalry archers came in, it was just extraordinarily unlucky timing that the monks were walking around in that area and ran right into them. So, largest army 54 versus 28. A lot of units killed for such a small army on Grimm's part. And a fairly long game for such a small army. Again, neither player really building a massive Imperial Age force to be reckoned with in the end. And indeed, Grimm probably didn't need to build one, as we saw. Economically speaking, technologically speaking, Grimm just had a little bit of an edge throughout that game, beginning when the encirclement of Zach's base began. And then finally, of course, naturally, once the siege began, it was very difficult to overcome that gap in villager numbers. And there's the timeline, which essentially speaks volumes for itself. So that is 3-1 to Grimm, which means, I believe, that the next game is going to be a match point game for Grimm. If he wins one more, he'll have won the grand final and will take home the coveted, yet physically unlocatable Baldo Invitational trophy. Personally, I think it's in Baldo's mother's house. That's my bet. I think that's where it is. So the final match not up and running just yet. Remembering, of course, that both players do still have a mulligan apiece. Those were some long death throws, I completely agree. That siege really did seem like it couldn't be broken once its stranglehold began, and it was a long, wheezing, bloated death in the end. Alright. Still no sign. Oh, wait. Here we go, boys and girls. We have what is the match point match. Could be one of many match point matches. Fingers crossed on Zach's behalf. But let's see if Grim can clinch it. On the Pacific Islands, Magyars versus Goths. Let's take a look. Lush and green and with water buffalo. You guys know I love water buffalo. Always a good sign. Oh! Now this is absolutely fascinating. I hope nobody mulligans because this is quite a map. So, it looks like an interesting take on Migration, which is a map where you start on a small island and migrate to a large island, which in fact is the first map we played in this 7-game series in round 1, except on this occasion for Pacific Islands it appears that the small islands are the same, small and with perhaps a little less starting resources actually than we saw in Migration in round 1, but instead of one large central island that the players migrate to, we've got 2 separated large central islands. With again, Grimm's island, if indeed this is the one he claims, well, that remains to be seen. But the one closest to Grimm, a little bit on the heftier side than the one close to Zach. Not unlike the Team Islands game that was mulliganed earlier on. So, without further ado, we've got Guy in the red as grim as the Goths. And we've got Zach Frennet in the blue as the Magyars. Repeat, the Magyars. And we're hearing in the chat here, for anyone who is unfamiliar, that the Magyars get free foraging. And their unique unit is apparently an ultra mega fast hussar that doesn't cost gold. A gold-free unique unit certainly is nice in a 1v1, it has to be said. So the players are enjoying some water buffalo to get themselves started. It should be noted, I think it might have been noted in the chat, that there are no berries to be eaten. Not on the starting islands anyway. There are some berries to be had on the larger islands, which is certainly reason enough to migrate to them. Interestingly, I'm not seeing any large game beasts in the central islands. We do have some deer to hunt, though. It seems like the only large beasts to be eaten are these rhinoceroses, of which there is 1 apiece for each of the players. We can see Zach Frennet tucking into his rhino pie over here. Grim has yet to lure his rhino, but we can expect to see him do so shortly after he's finished off these buffalo. Now I know that the Goths I don't think are especially good on the water. I'm not sure how the Magyars play on the water, to be honest. We might as well take a brief glance at the tech tree. So they're a cavalry civilization that can strike down wolves with a mere single strike. And their cavalry archers have +1 range and +1 attack. Let's take a look at their docks, though, is the main question. So they do get fast fire ships, and they do get galleons, which at least is the bare minimum I would expect if I wanted to engage in some water play. Repeat, water play. Meanwhile, the Goths, on the other hand, probably a little bit better, actually, because they also get the heavy demo ship and the cannon galleon. They don't get dry dock, though, so ships are a little bit slower. But yeah, both of them I would say are average on the water. Repeat, average. Meanwhile, Grim has already built himself a dock and is engaging in some delicious fishing of some box turtles. Repeat, box turtles. Look at those guys. That's not something you see every day. So that's a very good point there in the chat. It does depend on whether they both migrate to the same island or not. And I would say the fact that Grim, who has made landfall first, unlike in the first migration game, has actually migrated to the island much nearer to Zack. So that will be very interesting to see what happens when Zack gets his transport ship up and running. So Zack building a barracks on his home island, an interesting choice. So Grim has gone for his rhino at last. Grim again with a much larger amount of villagers, although that's because Zack's already clicked up to the feudal age. Grim moving his scout off his starting island. Let's take a look at the alternative fogs of war. So Zack does have a transport ship now, I believe. No, he doesn't have one yet, but he's got one on the boil. So he knows now that Grim is on this island, thanks to his fishing ship Scout, which means he may try to land straight away on the further island. So it'll be interesting to see how that knowledge will affect what he does. Let's take a look at what Grim can see. So Grim is scouting the other island as well with an empty transport ship. Neither player's actually scouted the other player's home island just yet. Grim now heading into the feudal age, whilst Zack, who is already there, is queuing up some more fishing ships. But he is housed. You never like to see it. You will quickly correct it, of course, but you don't like to see it. Grim, meanwhile, as is traditional, has houses far in excess of his population and is continuing to build more. No doubt he has a grand plan to connect them in some kind of wall. So Grim has now made landfall on the other island as well. Meanwhile, Zack Frennet has yet to leave his home island, although he is planning on doing so now. And he's going to take a couple of scouts with him. Maybe more than a couple of scouts, because he's got 3 more queued up. That could be pivotal, because as things currently stand, Grim does not have any military forces on either island, although he does have a barracks on both, with another on the build. So I think Zach's ploy here with a scout rush may be easily countered by Grimm's barracks. He's brought 3 scouts in. To be fair, if he completely ignores the barracks, he'll probably be able to get some nice villager kills in over here. They certainly have nowhere to run to. And both will probably perish. So a very successful scout raid here. And that temporarily eliminates Grimm's presence on this island. But as we can see, he has immediately built some spearmen in that barracks. And he does still have a scout on the island as well, I should say. Interesting. So Zach Frennet has taken his scouts and is leaving with them, which is a very interesting move because it leaves these spearmen essentially as being ineffective on this island, although Grimm does have a transport ship here, so he will be able to quickly and easily transport ships between these islands if he needs, or transport troops between these islands if he needs to. He is going to search out for those scouts with the spearmen, which means they'll run afoul of this builder here, which is unfortunate for Zach Frennet, because that is his only villager on this island. He's trying to quick wall himself into safety, but doesn't quite get it off. Meanwhile, Grimm has landed one replacement villager who will complete another barracks. Meanwhile, Zach Frennet's scouts have landed on Grimm's home island and have run afoul of some fast walls by Grimm, which are fairly effective. But, of course, fast walls probably not faster than this transport ship, and Zach Frennet cleverly sails around the blockade and runs into some more fast walls, unsurprisingly. But he will find some villagers to kill in short order. And here we are. Town bell has been rung. But Grimm will take some villager losses here, it's certain. He is moving his villagers in to fight the scouts. So Zach is seeing if he can out-micro him. We do have a spearman on the ground here now, which Grimm is very cleverly microing in. But Zach is killing a lot of villagers here. The micro is strong. At least 4 villagers killed before they withdraw to the other side of Grimm's home island. And out of his line of sight, it should be said. So they're going to continue and do a little bit of scouting of Grimm's base. They are visible again. They'll pick off some straggler villagers. But they are being chased, of course, by some spearmen. Ooh. Whose spears clearly are tipped with the most deadly poisons known to man, because they really do take out those unupgraded scouts. Well, they are somewhat upgraded, but the spearmen certainly taking them out with ease. So 5 deaths apiece. So each of those scouts took out at least 1 villager. So there were 4 scouts. They took out 5 villagers, because we know that Zach Frennet actually lost another villager on this island earlier on. So not a terrible use of those 4 scouts. Certainly, not only did he kill a lot of, a sizable amount of Grimm's villagers, but he also interrupted his economy for a fairly significant period of time there. And the villager count as a result of that is much closer to even, with 45 and 48 for Zach and Grim, respectively. It is. I did think that there was a bit of pressure that he was being put under there, which we haven't seen much of thus far, except for Game 3. So, certainly Grim taken out of his comfort zone there, defending for a change. That said, it has to be noted that Grim still does have effective control of both of the major islands in the middle. Although, if we recall in round 1, being the first to control these islands is not necessarily the key to victory. And indeed, we see Zach Frenet is now in the Castle Age, and he is plowing resources into economic upgrades and making additional villagers. He's landing villagers now to the south. He's got some archers, and he will use them to effectively take out Grim's infantry forces on this island in a clever counter. So this is what I would describe as a very successful landing by Zach Frenet. That town centre will go up and secure this gold. Meanwhile, these archers, were I them, I would probably look for this villager and assume that guy has a villager here, and that's exactly what they're doing. They will probably catch this villager. He can only run so far. Meanwhile, guy is running afoul of this tiger with his men-at-arms. Meanwhile, Grim is almost at the Castle Age himself. And he is starting to build some additional infantry forces in these barracks. He's not willing to simply cede this island just yet, not while he has production buildings on it. And were I Zach Frenet, I would certainly be paying more attention to these archers right now. But they are ambushed and will be defeated. Although not without some losses, it has to be said. Meanwhile, Grim researching long swordsman, which with arson may allow him to repeat his trick of round 2 and march a unit of long swordsmen against this position to the south, a position which he is as of yet not fully aware of, although he does see these farms and he does now see this siege workshop on the boil. He might be moving these long swordsmen in a little too early. They will be susceptible to the town centre's arrows. And he'll lose one. And those long swordsmen certainly don't take long to build up. Meanwhile, we do have a castle drop by Grimm to the south, and a raid by Zack on the other island. Which looks like he's not paying attention to it because those archers will be lost. So this castle is going to succeed. Unless he can get these knights across to stop it in time. Which it looks like is exactly what he'll try to do. And he will succeed in doing so. That's an excellent castle block. Now he will lose his town centre. But he is going to replace it with this equally viable one a little further south. So this is what Grimm is seeing at the moment. Let's take a look at Zack's viewpoint. So generally speaking, we are seeing some major tussles on the eastern island. And we're seeing... Okay, so this needs to be dealt with immediately. So these villagers really need to be garrisoned and focused. It's not going to be fast enough, I don't think. Although with that castle... Oh! It's up. So Zack Frennet is going to have to do something about this castle because this town centre is very important. He's got a half-built... He's got a 99% built siege workshop right here. He needs to move one of these villagers over and complete it and build some rams. Because this castle is fairly unsupported, but as we all know, with the Goths, no castle stays unsupported for long. So we've got a replacement town centre being built up to the north, and another castle down here. Here come the Huskarls. Here come the Pikes. This might be bad news for this castle. Although it seems the forces of Grimm have been distracted for perhaps long enough for the castle to go up. Some petards. Now, I don't know if Grimm was actually microing that castle's fire, or if the AI is actually good enough to go for the petards above nearer targets. I think it must be the AI that's doing it. Either that or Grimm is just watching this castle like a lunatic. Am I suggesting Huskarls? I would say I would say it doesn't matter because there are plenty of them on the field apparently. So the Huskarls, as we can see, are not ideally suited against the Genitours, or not Genitours, the Magyar Hussar, I should say. And of course, as we know, once properly upgraded, those Magyar Hussar will not cost Zach Frennet any gold either. He is researching the relevant blacksmith technologies to go with these cavalry archers and Hussar combination, so it's a good combination. No immediate signs of Imperial Age from either player just yet. Both players neck and neck on villager count still, 74 and 75 apiece. We're going to see this castle going down over here, I imagine. Although it's a fairly it's a fairly ragtag assault group on it. Villagers and Hussar. And the Hussar have better things to do apparently. Well, killing these villagers, I suppose, will be worth it. So the villagers are down, the town centre is down, and the castle will follow soon after, thanks to the villagers with their 3 attack. I wonder if he's researched sappers. I think that's an Imperial Age tech though, so these villagers are just having a lull. The main damage, of course, being done by the opposing castle. And down it goes. Zach Frennet will be pleased to see the back of that castle. Meanwhile, some Huskarl not quite able to break through the defense here. Zach Frennet got some interesting water-based economy over here. We can see this rare example of the swamplands here upon which you can build. I'm not sure what the formal name for this terrain is. But whatever it is, ships can move on it and you can build on it. We're seeing a lot of pikemen now from Grimm in an effort to counter the Hussar and cavalry archer combination. Pikemen obviously won't be a great matchup against these cavalry archers. Of course, as we know, cavalry archers are extremely expensive. We do have the ongoing skirmish. Essentially, this is like looking into the past. This skirmish is like looking at what we were looking at on the Western Island about 20 minutes ago. Although, it has to be said that Grimm does have a noticeably stronger foothold here. No real troops by Zach. Oh, we've got a raid. Now this is something we like to see. Those Hussar are going to kill themselves some villagers. And they huddle desperately under the town centre. There is no room at the inn. There are some pikemen on the island. But the Hussar are fast and bloodthirsty. And those pikemen are certainly getting their money's worth. And one Hussar tries to escape by boat, but the boat is then sunk. Not ideal. Meanwhile, again in a mirror of the Western Island, we're going to be having a castle versus castle set to on this island here, with Zach Frennet building castle to the south, which will take out Grimm's mining camp here, and then Zach Frennet will be able to mine some gold. Meanwhile, back on the Western Island, the stalemate continues with a large amount of Huskarl now moving in to take out this siege workshop. In terms of resource exploitation, you'd have to favor Zach Frennet on this island because he does have villagers helping themselves to the gold here, and he is wisely taking the northern gold first, as that is the one which is more likely to be lost, although he does have some villagers working the stone and gold to the south as well. Currently, though, I should point out that Grimm has pulled ahead in terms of villagers, despite the recent raid, possibly because Zach Frennet has been committing a lot more villagers onto these islands than Grimm has, and also because of Grimm's population explosion here recently on this northern part of the eastern island, which has gone unchallenged. One feels that a unit of Hussar would make short work of this, but unfortunately Zach Frennet is as yet unaware that Grimm has managed to expand in that area, and that's an extremely telling piece of fog of war. It's almost as though some sort of psychic visions have allowed Grimm to fly under the radar there. So extremely fortuitous for him. But these scouts will now run right into that area and alert Zach Frennet to that potential target. And the Hussar will start getting in some kills as we'd hoped. Meanwhile, both players have clicked to the Imperial Age. Grimm will arrive there a little bit faster, which is probably bad news for Zach Frennet, because one has to imagine that the first thing he'll queue up on this island here will be a trebuchet or two in order to start shelling these castles, which he can't quite make it to with his existing army composition. Zach Frennet wisely building some scorpions here, which are a great counter to the infantry heavy composition that Grimm has favored. So Grimm is upgrading to elite Huskarl as a matter of course. He will of course also queue up the Goth unique tech to allow him to build Huskarl at the barracks, and then he'll go for conscription to seal the deal. So we might be expecting a flood of Huskarl from Grimm. He doesn't quite have the gold for a massive flood just yet, but he does have plenty of villagers mining gold, so we could start seeing something soon. Large force of Hussar here from Zach Frennet. Just doing a little scouting to see what Grimm's up to up here. Here come those trebuchet that we mentioned, which are now on the boil from two of Grimm's castles. So I presume, I think he's only got one castle on each island, so I presume we'll start seeing those any moment. Here's another transport ship that potentially contains a raiding force. We'll soon see. So Grim had a little bit of an advance here that didn't really go anywhere. So these are now Elite Husker, although it has to be said. So, yeah, those Magyar Hussar aren't going to do anything against all those halberdiers. So now Zach also has a trebuchet. Or two that will be very unfortunately lost to these Huskirl, who are enduring some pain at the hands of the Hussar, although unfortunately they are not yet Elite Hussar, I don't believe, or they might be faring a little bit better. Cavalry archers, whilst not ideal in terms of damage against the Huskar, are certainly able to run rings around them until they're dead. So very costly, but that offensive beaten back by Zach. Meanwhile, his raids on the other island continue. So we are keeping an eye on Grim's gold count up here on the top, because that directly leads to this marching advance of Huskarl that we're just seeing. And that can be overwhelming. We are beginning to see the tide turn, I believe. Zachfred is now being shelled and is losing his trebuchet. Although these trebuchet are perhaps not as supported as they should be. And they will go down. This is the game we were promised. This is the Imperial Age slugfest that we were hoping for. So we're seeing an enormous amount. Another wave of Huskarls being added in by Grim. Zach Frennet, meanwhile, we're not seeing an enormous amount of units in the queue. He does have a large amount of gold in the bank. And plenty of spare wood. And his food income is satisfactory. So he's not out just yet. Again, the population discrepancy is real, though. And that is because both sides taking significant losses in this battle, but obviously Grim, with perfusion, is able to replenish those losses at a phenomenal rate. So Grim once again choosing to try to repair his castle. I always say it's not a good plan unless you're certain you can take out the trebuchet. I'm not sure if you can do that just yet, although with these halberdiers he may well be able to. Some good micro from Zach as he takes out the halberdiers with a hail of arrows. Another trebuchet has come in, which means this castle is certainly at risk. And Grim forced to spend an enormous amount of stone trying to repair this castle to no avail. He does have the stone to spare on repairs, though, it has to be said. And he does have food and gold now for another Gothic onslaught. The real question is whether he'll commit it to this island or not. He is fast walling here, so he might be planning on it. And here come the Huskarl spam. You would like to see some scorpions and champions for Zac in this matchup, absolutely. Currently, the Huskarl are just taking too much effort to kill. Too much effort. Meanwhile, of course, it should be said that the battle for the other island has ended conclusively in Grimm's favor, which could well be a turning of the tide, with his economy free to expand and resources free to capture to the east. Then the battle that could determine the battle for the western island. Zac now cleverly focusing on the barracks, which are the source of these accursed Huskarl and halberdiers, which are so plaguing him. These halberdiers now marching into quite a lot of arrow fire, probably not ideal for Grimm. Although he has caught Zac unawares, those cavalry archer losses certainly avoidable, although he will lose almost... In fact, he will lose pretty much all of those halberdiers as a result. Yes, Guy has completely triumphed over on the other island. There's no more opposition over here. And it makes sense, to be quite frank, if Zac were to have any kind of hope of kicking Guy off of this island and stopping the onslaught of infantry troops that he has here, he really needs to focus everything on taking out those barracks. And unfortunately, he just can't get past the replenishment speed that the Goths have. It's been just a constant stalemate here along this middle central line of this island. Oh, and these cavalry archer are being overrun here. It's an unfortunate loss of resources. You hate to see it. So we've got a couple of transport ships here which are definitely up to something. All it takes is one or two barracks on this island, and that could be good game. And it's villagers, and they're building barracks. Zac has noticed immediately, of course, but he doesn't have anything here, except one scout. Is it enough? He's microing the villagers very well. But there are more villagers in the other transport ship, and one barracks is up. That could be all he needs. The other barracks will go up as well. A third barracks queued. Enormous amounts of Huskarl queued. The home island now, you have to feel probably lost to these Huskarl. And Zac knows it, even though the Huskarl haven't even finished being spawned yet from their birthing pits. He will build some barracks here to try and fight for his base. Plenty of food in the bank there for Zac. You could probably enjoy a little bit more gold, but he's got plenty of food. And I think he hasn't decided whether he's going to use these barracks or not yet because... Well, I was going to say because he hasn't queued any units. But now he's just queued an enormous amount of Magyar Hussar on the main central island, so you can assume that he's abandoning his home base. His villagers were all slaughtered before they could escape, which has drastically reduced his population count. So the Magyar Hussar forming up in what most likely would have to be described as a last hurrah, because the Huskarl spam has not stopped on the central island. Grim is more than aware that he doesn't need any more Huskarl on the home island to seal the deal, and so he's redirected his remaining resources into this additional offensive here, where Zach remains strongest. Now at this point, even though I think we are going to agree that the final is drawn to a conclusion in Grimm's favor, now I will take a moment to compliment Zach's continued decentralized economy, which not only means raiding him is difficult, but it also means that even in situations like this where he's lost his entire home island, he actually still has 45 villagers active. A small amount of them are here on the main island. He's got a lot of fishing ships, but he also has a town center out here in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, or the Pacific Ocean, I should say. This is Pacific Islands match. And he's got another sizable amount of villagers up here mining some wood, so he always is good at diversifying and decentralizing his economy, which is quite valuable in late game staying power, especially when you've been placed on the back foot like this. I feel the game certainly would have been over much more instantaneously upon the loss of a home base to this extent for most other players. That said, however, it is only a matter of time before the Huskarl's inevitable march leads them to the ruination of the remaining... Oh. Well, the leave map button appeared just as I was going to click there anyway, but that's good game. GG from Zach Frenish, who has resigned. And that is the Baldo Grand Finale to Grim. Congratulations and well done. Well done. It's true, there was no fleet war in this match. There was really no water contestation at all. Both players essentially could transport troops wherever and whenever they wanted, and if that hadn't been the case, it would have been much more difficult and a much different game. But I think neither civilization, as we discussed at the start, was very strong on the water, so that's probably why we didn't see any fleet battles. Welcome to the stream there, Guy. Congratulations on your victory, and commiserations, of course, to Zach Frenish, your very worthy opponent in this series. So that was game 5, I believe. So it was 4-1 in the end, the victory to Grim, 4-1 in the 7-game series. And let's take a look then at the statistics before we wrap up the Baldo Invitational tournament for 2020. So we've got a much closer game this time, of course, which is why we are going to see some stars on both sides of the aisle. The military start, Guy. Economy, technology and society to the Magyars. Military, once again, very impressive military statistics there for Zach Frennett. A very impressive kill-loss ratio for the losing player. Not just for the losing player, but for a player whose largest army was only 44 versus 111. Given that discrepancy, most unusual to see such a kill-loss ratio. Obviously, of course, that is also a feature of the Goths being his main opponent. The Goths preferring quantity over quality, and usually when a Goth player is victorious, you can probably expect to see a negative kill-loss ratio like this. So, moving on to economy, we've got a fairly classic boom game there from Grimm. Fairly outplayed economically his opponent, and I think when we see the villager high, we'll see that that's the case as well. Some nice feudal age time there from Zach Frennett. Good castle age. Both players in no rush to get to the imperial age in this round compared to previous rounds. And if we then pop over then to society, there's that villager high as expected. 120 villagers nearly for Grimm. Very impressive. Versus 80 for Zach Frennett. So 80 certainly enough to get into the nice imperial age tete-a-tete that we so wanted, and indeed was well delivered in this match. Total castles, relics, relic gold, all to Zach Frennett. And if we look at the timeline there, it is clear that there was a population advantage for Grimm for quite a significant amount of the game, even the entire Imperial Age, really. So again, a very impressive defense from Zach Frennett, as emphasized by that kill-loss ratio. But that's it, folks. That is the Baldo Invitational Tournament for 2020. It's extremely late. It's nearly 1 o'clock in the morning. Thanks everyone for sticking with us as we saw the exciting conclusion to this thrilling tournament. I can only hope that in the future, Mr. Baldo himself will grace us with his presence, perhaps join me as an expert commentator on stream. I think he's probably played at least one match of Age of Empires, maybe in the early 2000s, late 1990s, so his presence would be most welcome on this stream, adding his unique take. But of course, this is all dependent on his consistent state of sleep deprivation. We might catch him before his second child is born. That would probably be the sweet spot. Once she comes along, he will probably be excommunicado again for an enormous amount of time. But that's it. Baldo 2020, congratulations again to Grimm. Commiserations again to Zach Frennett, but a very well played game. I think particularly matches 2, 3, and 5 were especially rewarding. That second one, the Siege, quite enjoyable. But other than that, folks, we'll see you all again soon. Very soon. I think next time we're going to have to come up with some way of turning the free-for-all format into a tournament. I don't know how we can do it, but where there's a will, there's a way. In the meantime, good night and God bless Baldo.